David Bowie or Bowie, depending on your personal taste on how to pronounce it, was a British rock pop star from Bromley in Kent. He first started to come to prominence in the late 60s and early 70s and was musically active up until his death in 2016. He was noted for his ever-shifting style and his constant reinvention of himself musically and adopting a variety of personal public personas. His popularity waxed and waned over his career as the styles and his personas that he experimented with were more or less successful in terms of public connecting with them. Some might accuse him of style over substance, but it's more true, I think, to say that the style was the substance. He released 27 studio albums, including 2 credited to the band Tin Machine. He also had a career as an actor. He was an active artist, an art collector, and as one of the world's pop megastars, his history, public and private life, have all been endlessly picked over in various formats.
Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the album The Man Who Sold the World by David Bowie. Bowie, however you pronounce it. I pronounce it Bowie. Released in the year 1970, and it was his 3rd album. It's my first time listening to it, but I did know the track The Man Who Sold the World. Although it wasn't a single, apparently many people will know that track. It's quite well known. And I would describe this as art rock, which is kind of, I would say, halfway between a straightforward rock and prog rock. Prog rock is kind of flamboyant and complicated and has all sorts of stuff going on. Art rock has got kind of quite a bit of interesting stuff going on, and is less straightforward, but isn't quite as complex or self-indulgent, possibly, as prog. Some people say it is. Acclaimed Music have listed this as glam rock, and I did, as I was listening through, think, this kind of feels like some glam rock that I've heard. So I think maybe one of my touch points for glam rock is Not the Hoople, which was kind of stuff that was about to come out. There were other people as well. Unfortunately, one of the best known glam rock artists was Gary Glitter, who is kind of persona non gratis these days. But the stylistic approach often reminded me of that. And one of the, I did some reading about the album. So what I normally do is I do a listen, then I read and listen. And I don't know why it's become these symbols with my hands. And when I was reading, I read that somebody had said that the first track had elements of prog rock in it. I kind of agree. Maybe partly because it's longer, but partly just the approach it takes is a little bit more leaning in that direction. The band that we've got here is kind of so. This is The Man Who Sold the World. The next album is in the kind of the discography of David Bowie is Hunky Dory. The next album after that is Ziggy Stardust. And but he invented this character Ziggy Stardust, and with his band the Spiders from Mars. Now the Spiders from Mars, 2 of them are on this album. So they're Mick Ronson on guitar and Mike Woodmansey, if I pronounce that right, on drums. The bassist was somebody different for the Spiders on Mars. The bassist on this album is Tony Visconti, who I've heard of, who was also producing this album. Now, apparently the band and David Bowie had disagreements on the extent of who wrote what on this. Some of the band claimed that David Bowie actually didn't do that much. He kind of sat around with his new wife, Angie, and then when he had to get up and do some singing, he did, and he made up some words kind of quickly for it. He disagreed, and I can I understand that these disagreements happen. One of his arguments was that who else would have chord sequences like this? And I kind of hear that and go, yeah, this is very David Bowie like chord sequences. Not that I'm a huge expert on this. But I would say it definitely has a feel of a band album rather than a singer-songwriter album. It's consistent sounds, I think, part of it on the way through in the production. So this was apparently a departure from David Bowie's first two albums, which are more funky. Some people have said this is the first real David Bowie album, and it is the start, of the Ziggy Stardust personality. And there are elements here of, people have said, hard rock, blues rock, and the emergence of this glamness, which was about. So apparently, he kind of got kicked off by David Bowie appearing on Top of the Pops wearing glitter. I guess if you're going to kick off glam, that's one way of doing it. I certainly would say it's not very poppy. It hasn't got there were no singles that came out of this album, and it doesn't feel like any of these tracks would have been singles. It's kind of got a sprawling feel. It's not going to focus on tunes and catchy hooks and things like that. And apparently, it didn't sell very well when it first came out. It didn't get a good response from critics. Retrospectively, it's had more sales and more critical acclaim. It did better in the States than it did in the UK. So yeah, take from that what you like. I'm going to do a bit of description of some of the instrumental stuff here. There's a squawk sound for the guitar, which is kind of very limited in tonal range, kind of in the middle, and is quite distinctive. There's a bass that I'm going to describe as being generally quite a farty bass sound, which apparently was quite common in the 70s. Somebody commented on a previous video that I did when I mentioned farty bass, and they said very 70s. Rock drums, there's quite a lot of kind of going around and complex stuff on the drums, and often acoustic guitar. There's bits of keyboards in here. So in 1970, so very early days for synth, but there is some synth in here. And I spotted a stylophone in here as well. There's quite a distinctive way that it's played. I went, that sounds like a stylophone. And it is, which is a. I'll go and look it up if you're interested. I can't be bothered to explain what it is. I would say here the production is, frankly, I think it's a bit of a mess. It's kind of rambling. There's too much going on at times. The guitar playing is great. It's really strong. This is Mick Ronson, and people have waxed lyrical about how good he is, and I can understand that from what I hear here. But it is kind of incessant, and he's got stuff going on that's happening behind the vocals, and it's kind of too many focal points. Sometimes there are bits I kind of felt like, it feels a bit like Jimi Hendrix, kind of live, just soloing away and doing stuff. And it has that kind of semi-live feel to it, which some people will like. But I felt like the album could have been tighter, or it could have been, more kind of intention to the production to it. Um, let's talk about his singing. So, one critic in the stuff that I read said he has a very generic voice. I completely disagree. I think he's got a very distinctive voice, but it's actually a very versatile voice. And his voice is probably the best thing on this album, is that he does a lot of different things here. And he has a tendency to slide and warble, and sometimes it's hard to specify. If you're trying to write down what the notes are of what he's singing, that could be quite hard at times. He does have a tendency to sing as different characters with different voices, and he does that really well on this album. He does a Mark Bolan impression at one point, which is it's suddenly doing a fast tremolo rather than this long, slow vibrato that he tends to do. There's also one of the tracks, which is the more kind of gentler, more acoustic track, After All, where he's singing quite quietly, and I think that's a great sound he's got with this quiet singing that he does. Lyrically, it's dark, twisted fantasy tales, futurism. Several critics use the adjective unsettling, and I can kind of see that. He's in some slightly arty, slightly what's the word for dystopian? That's it. World of his own here, which so all of these things combined make it quite an unusual album in some ways. It feels very much like a moment in time. It was 1970. It feels very much like a throwing together of of something that was kind of, in some ways, off the cuff. And the stories that I read about it kind of back that up and seem to say that it wasn't an album that was crafted over a long period of time. Um, but it's the kind of off the cuff that's an outpouring of creativity. There's almost too much creativity going on here. So, did I enjoy it? Yes, with reservations, some fairly strong reservations, I have to say, at points. There are aspects that I really like, aspects, obviously, that I was less keen on. I think if it had been more honed, it could have come across better. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think of this album. So please really share that with me by leaving me a comment. That's it from me for now.
We're painting our faces and dressing in thoughts from the skies, from paradise. But they think that we're holding a secretive ball, want someone